The results are in from Gateway's third-party investigation into Robert Morris' behavior. He stepped down as senior pastor from America's largest megachurch for sexual misconduct with a minor who was only 12 years old at the time and lasted for 4 years. Her name was Cindy Clemishire. We're going to take a look at the full results of the detailed investigation that lasted many weeks and included interviews that took hundreds of hours. And one of the main elders shared the results at a recent service, and we will review the video. Big questions to be answered is, did they find any other victims of Robert Morris? And a shocking piece of information about law enforcement's involvement in all of this. So you're going to want to stick with me to the end. Unlike other ministries, I do see some hope for Gateway Church in all of this, and they have made some really good changes in the corporate structure to ensure that these type of things don't happen again. And so we're going to go over that as well in this video. I'm not sure I would attend their church, but I do feel that Gateway has responded better than others in similar situations. Hi, my name is Joshua Simone. Welcome to my channel. The ministry is called Torn Curtain. That is because when Jesus died on the cross, the curtain in the Old Testament temple was torn from top to bottom. We now have a new covenant, a better covenant, and direct access to a relationship with God through Jesus' death and resurrection. But before we get into that, let's take a quick look at the disastrous results from a scandal like this and what the effects that it has on a church. So you're seeing here in the Christian Post article that Gateway's church to lay off staff after a 35% drop in tithes among Robert Morris controversy. So this has been absolutely devastating for this church. And the truth is, part of the reason why I'm doing stories and covering stories like this is on this channel, I'm going to go after the tough and controversial subjects. The things that they say that we shouldn't talk about are probably the things that we should talk about. And honestly, this is a moment for ministries, pastors, and those in leadership within the church to feel the sting of all of this. Why? Because it'll help us chart a better future. Okay, it'll be a warning sign to say, don't go down this path, because the results can be devastating. One of the three main elders at the multi-church Gateway campus in Texas announced plans to reduce staff among a 35% drop in giving after the 5 months after the resignation of the former senior pastor Robert Morris. So one of the main elders at the multi-campus Gateway Church in Texas announced a plan to reduce staff among a 35% drop-off in giving in the 5 months after the resignation of founder and former pastor Robert Morris. One of their elders shared a financial update in a video message to his staff this week, and it was posted online by the church watchdog blog WatchKeep and confirmed the authenticity by the church official. We have, in fact, seen our tithes reduce between 35 and 40%. And as a result, we need to go and start taking a look at the ministry itself and looking at some staff reductions, he says. As a leadership, we want to be clear and transparent as possible as we walk through this process. Okay, so you're seeing there just devastating results for Gateway Church. You might be talking about them losing around $35 million, possibly more. And I do think Gateway Church will survive this, but I feel that it will never be the same church as it was before all of this. Now, real quick, before we get into this topic, let me explain why would you do a video like this? Well, I believe that the church is sick, and I believe the church needs major reformation. We don't want to start a revolution which would call for the destruction of the church. We want to see reformation. We want to see changes. We want to see the church learn from their mistakes and do better, especially as it pertains to the charismatic church. We aren't going to have a better future until we acknowledge the genuine issues that we have. And I can assure you that so many in the church today are blowing off these issues. They aren't understanding or seeing what God is doing in this hour. Many see these as just isolated incidences. Some heard some leaders call it like a plane crash. It just happens so rarely that let's just move on and not talk about this. But this whole year we have seen back exposures, one after another. So we have a serious problem. And we must acknowledge our way of doing church isn't better, and we must look for reformation. We must look for changes. We must look for new ways of doing things, new ways of doing church, because there are definitely problems here. And I hear many popular TV preachers come forward this week, and they are saying that we should not talk about these issues. Some are even calling the exposures the spirit of accusation, slander, and the spirit of offense. They are saying that these matters should be worked out quietly. And this is because a large majority of the popular preachers have no training in theology, counseling, and lack real experience with people. Some of these people couldn't even run a Dunkin' Donuts, yet they're running mega churches in many instances. In the charismatic church, one can become a pastor or even apostle with very little training. And let me say this frankly, very few preachers actually know what they're talking about, and it's embarrassingly the truth in the charismatic church. I'm only listening to voices that state that they want to see all the darkness in public ministries uncovered and brought to light. That's just for me personally. You'll have to make your own decisions. But I find it disheartening that these ministers would come forward and say, oh, we just need to be quiet. We shouldn't talk about this stuff. It's gossip or whatever it is. Okay, all of the apostles dealt with situations like this. Jesus dealt with situations like this. Paul dealt with situations like this. John the Baptist dealt with situations like this. We see this all throughout the New Testament. Sometimes there are appropriate times to go public and deal with issues that are in the church, to name names, to call out things, and to deal with it publicly. We hope that it doesn't come to that, but sometimes it does. So hit the subscribe button. I promise to bring you the best Christian content. I'm going to go after the tough and controversial subjects. Many might interpret that as being divisive, but my heart is to see the church be the best that it can be. Please help me get to 100K subscribers, which should happen this week. I appreciate that. But let me ask you a quick question before we get into the Gateway Church investigation. Should the Diddy and Epstein list of SA be revealed to the public? Would that be a bad thing? Would that be a good thing? And would that be something that God wants to see? And I think you all know the answer to that question. They should be released because it'll bring out all of the darkness into the light among the powerful and rich people, so we can see out in the open who are the wolves. And it will glorify God because that darkness will be exposed. And justice and restoration can be rendered for the victims, stopping the cycle of abuse. This exposure would be good for the world. Then how much more do we need something like this to happen in the church? Because to be quite frankly, the church should know better and should be held to much higher accountability because we have a higher level of knowledge that comes from sitting in the church, reading the Bible, and growing in the understanding of Christianity. So if we want to see the Epstein list released, the Diddy list released, because we want to see all that darkness uncovered and brought to the light, why wouldn't we want to see the same thing happen in the church? Yet I'm just hearing countless ministers after ministers saying, don't talk about this, stay quiet, we can handle these issues in-house. And it just doesn't add up on a common sense level. So if you're a pastor of a church and the leader says not to talk about these things, just remember, if someone is abused in your church, emotionally, physically, or spiritually, you will find that they're probably not going to talk about it. So you know what kind of church you're in. And I want to hear my church leader say, if darkness is present in public leadership, let it be exposed. If darkness is present in a big ministry, then let it come to light. And we can get to the healing of the church instead of the false peace that we have right now. Listen, we want unity in the body of Christ, but not at the sake of truth and justice. We don't want a watered down gummy bear Mickey Mouse church where basically anything goes. And we want to see things dealt with. And when the world sees us dealing with our issues, when the world sees us having integrity, when the world sees us dealing with issues, they'll know that we're a safe place that they want to come to. When we're sweeping these things under the rug, when we don't talk about them, it just proves the fact that we are in a safe place. Listen, if you were a pastor in ministry, what would you be saying? I understand from their point of view, oh, don't talk about these things. Oh, this is gossip. Oh, just let God deal with this situation. If I was a pastor, I'd probably be saying the same thing because it will bring It will bring more scrutiny to my behavior, to my ministry, to the pastors that are underneath me. And I don't want that. I don't want greater accountability. I don't want more transparency. I don't want to have to work for people's trust. So people that are saying to cover this up, man, I don't trust them. I really don't. Now let's get into the investigation, into the details of Robert Morris and the situation at Gateway Church after this scandal was uncovered 5 months ago. Let's get into the introduction of their elder speaking.
As you all know, back in June of this year, Gateway Church engaged the law firm Haynes & Boone to conduct an independent investigation related to the childhood sexual abuse of Cindy Clemishire by our former senior pastor, Robert Morris. Haynes & Boone has completed their work, and their findings have been presented to the members of a subcommittee that was formed to receive and act on this information.
Okay, so for those of you who are just joining in to this situation right now, let's go over the details. As many of you know, a 40-year-old secret was finally made to the public a few months ago that Robert Morris, a young minister in his 20s, had S.A., Cindy Clemishire, when she started when it was just 12 years old and lasted 4 years until she was 16. As number 3223 says, be sure to know that your sin will find you out. So people have the shocking comments on the videos. Well, what is the big deal? This was from 40 years ago. Isn't the sins of Robert Morris covered under the blood of Jesus? Well, at the time, it seems Robert Morris did not admit his sins publicly. And he did step down from ministry at a time, but it was said that he had stepped down due to pride, and it wasn't fully made public that his moral failure included a minor, which is not only a sin, but a crime. However, it seems that it was never publicly known. This was not publicly disclosed. Only a handful of people really know. So how could something be covered under the blood of Jesus that never fully 100% came to light, and they weren't transparent with the details? Kind of important detail that was left out, that a crime was committed. So this caused Robert Morris to immediately resign, and we haven't heard from him since, which is shocking. Sometimes what we don't say says more than what we say. Another pastor at Gateway Church stepped down due to a moral failure shortly after that. And then Robert's son, James, was also released from staff at Gateway Church. He was due to take over as senior pastor, but since has launched a new church almost right away. And several elders and staff members resigned as well. So listen to the elders explain it from their side exactly what happened.
Over the years, Robert Morris shared his version of this story, that he was unfaithful in his marriage while in his early 20s. And according to his version, Robert confessed his sin to apostolic leaders in the late 1980s, many years before Gateway Church was formed. He stepped down from ministry for 2 years and then was restored back into ministry with the blessing of those same apostolic leaders. We as a church knew what our former senior pastor shared publicly, and many people, including myself, simply believed his version of the story. But on June 14th of this year, Cindy Clemishire shared her story publicly, clearly stating that she was the one referred to in Robert Morris's story that he had described as a sexual affair. And contrary to Robert's version, Cindy was not a consenting adult, but rather a child of 12 and a victim of sexual abuse. Furthermore, she shared that the sexual abuse happened on multiple occasions over 4.5 years. And on the same evening of June 14th, Robert Morris directed Gateway employees to release a statement that intended to minimize the severity of Cindy's claims in a final attempt to conceal the truth. And as you know, our Gateway family was rocked by these revelations. Over the next 48 hours, the elders were able to independently verify critical elements of Cindy's story, enabling us to move forward and swiftly confront Robert Morris. And when we insisted on meeting with him, he immediately resigned.
Okay, so you just heard it directly themselves. From what we can tell, it seems as Robert Morris took one last attempt to try to cover up what he did. And when confronted about his behavior, he promptly resigned, adding another layer of sinfulness to this situation. Okay, now before we get into the details, why are we talking about this? Well, this isn't gossip because this is public information that has been confirmed by an investigation. So this isn't gossip. Secondly, we are not talking about this to bash Robert Morris. He has already been proved to be wrong in this situation and has been removed from ministry. And the outrage, the angry rage from this situation has gone public. And I think he understands how people feel, that they are very, very angry at this situation. And he's likely never to return again to public ministry. However, we do need to talk about these situations to prevent them from happening again in the future, to see reformation in the church. And this is a learning and teaching moment for the body of Christ to help get the church healthy again. And I think this video towards the end is going to point to ways that we can help make the church healthy again, that we could look into the accountability structures and look into the way that churches are run. And we're going to get more into that in a bit. So their elder is going to explain the investigation now.
But despite his resignation, we knew that further investigation was needed. And we knew that we as elders did not have the objectivity or the qualifications to properly investigate. So Haynes and Boone was chosen because they are deeply experienced with conducting internal investigations. And this inquiry had to be truly independent, meaning it was conducted by a law firm with no prior connection to Gateway Church or any individuals involved. They were given full access to our staff and internal communications. But we also knew from the beginning that this report would have certain limitations. A number of senior leaders had transitioned out of Gateway over its 24-year history, and we had no power to compel anyone to participate in this investigation if they chose not to. And to date, we've had 6 individuals who have declined to meet with Haynes and Boone, one of those being Robert Morris. Haynes and Boone briefed this subcommittee.
Okay, so it seems that several elders did not participate in this investigation, most likely friends of Robert Morris. And of course, Robert Morris declined to meet with investigators in this case. Those facts should be considered if Robert ever decides to reemerge again and think that he could enter into ministry. It should be noted that he refused to participate in this investigation, and that should be considered if he tries to sneak his way into ministry, which I see as probably a high possibility. But now let's get and hear more details about the investigation.
And we want to share a summary of the facts that we learned from their investigation. For starters, you should know that none of us on the subcommittee had ever heard of any sexual abuse allegations against Robert Morris until June, when Cindy Clemishire shared her story. Haynes and Boone's specific task was to conduct an independent investigation into both the conduct of Robert Morris, but not limited to just Cindy Clemishire, and what was known and when by various individuals who have served in leadership throughout Gateway's history. Our church cooperated fully. Haynes and Boone was very thorough and diligent in their work. And during the course of their inquiry, Haynes and Boone's collected 780 gigabytes of data. They reviewed thousands of pages of documents and emails, and they interviewed more than 24 individuals. In total, hundreds and hundreds of hours were expended on this investigation. Confidentiality agreements where they had been in place with former employees and relevant were released. And as I said before, there were 6 individuals who refused to cooperate with Haynes and Boone in an in-person interview. We are relieved to share with you that in the course of their investigation, Haynes and Boone did not learn of any other allegations of sexual assault by Robert Morris. No other abuse by him has been reported or uncovered by Haynes and Boone. And at this time, to our knowledge, there are no other victims of Robert Morris beyond Cindy Clemishire.
Okay, as I've noted in some other videos before, that for these type of situations, it's better if a law firm isn't used and a ministry is brought in instead that are trauma-informed, that know how to deal with people that might have been SA'd. But again, they went forward with this law firm. And I predicted this when I first started covering this story. I said that Robert Morris would not have another victim like the Mike Bickle situation, who seemed to have relations with several different women, according to the allegations. So only one woman came forward with accusations against Robert, and that is Cindy Clemishire. She has spoken out. You can hear her interviews on various different platforms. When talking with several executive pastors and senior pastors about this, they did distinguish between fallen pastors who had a relationship with one woman and those who had a series of relationships with one woman. They also made a distinction between those who made just a one-time mistake and a bad lapse of judgment, and those who had a pattern and systematic ongoing situation. So the ones that just had a one-off situation that was only one time, one situation, a lot of people felt that those people could be restored. But those that had abused people where it seemed that the abuse was ongoing or there were multiple situations, a lot of people didn't feel like they could be restored. But because Robert's behavior involved a minor, these are not just sins that took place, but also crimes. But I did want to state that no other victims have come forward with additional allegations about Robert, and that is pretty comforting, and that's what I had predicted. I do feel that Robert did learn from that situation and changed, but at the same time, he did fail to disclose all the details.
And to anyone out there, if you were a victim of sexual abuse as a child, I want you to know you cannot consent to sexual abuse or sexual activity as a child. No child ever can. Don't let the belief that it was consensual stop you from coming forward. We want to create a culture where individuals feel safe reporting abuse and any other serious issues.
Now, you would think this would go without saying, but many have mentioned in the comment section, does Cindy not hold any responsibility for all of this? No, because Cindy was 12 years old at the time. She was a minor. And the abuse lasted for 4 years, making Cindy 16 at the end. And if somehow Cindy wanted these things to happen as she got older, it doesn't matter, because anyone who is under 18 is a minor. And this is a population that is protected by law. Why? Because these people, these teens, or in this case, this child that developed into a teen, they're still developing in these ages. Your brain is still developing. You don't have the critical thinking skills. You don't have the skills and the life experience that's involved. And that's why this population is protected, because they're more vulnerable. Okay, so they don't have the ability to distinguish and really handle predators in different situations. They have to be protected by adults. So they definitely don't have the emotional development to handle an adult sexual relationship. So that it's refreshing that from the beginning, Gateway Church really got this. They showed compassion for Cindy. I really felt that they were really genuine in that compassion and unequivocally condemned Robert Morris in this situation, severing all ties with him and launching an investigation almost immediately. Gateway handled this so much better than the other churches who took time to come clean, or ministers took time to come clean. They did the right thing right from the beginning and launched an investigation immediately. And that's what you want to do in front of these situations. You don't want to give the room to the devil to turn this into a circus, to turn this into a media frenzy. Get the guilty person out of ministry immediately, or let them pause their ministry until the investigation is completed. Now we're going to find out what others and on staff knew if Robert's sexual sins were with a minor. Let's get into that.
We learned from this investigation about what elders knew before June 14th, 2024, and what actions they took or failed to take. And we now know that there were elders and employees at Gateway who knew before June 14th, 2024, that Cindy was 12 at the time the abuse began. Additionally, we also learned there were other individuals who were notified in the years prior to June 14th, 2024, about allegations of abuse, but they failed to inquire further. In other words, there are two groups. There's one group of individuals that knew without a doubt that Cindy Clemishire was 12 when the abuse began. And there's a second group who knew of allegations of sexual abuse by Robert Morris, who had enough information that they should have led them to ask more questions, but they did not. Both groups are fundamentally wrong and simply cannot and will not be tolerated at this church. As a result, we have decided to draw a very bright line here based on biblical and moral standards and our values as a church family. And we can report to you that as of today, no individual in either group serves as an elder, is employed by, or works at Gateway Church. They have been removed.
Okay, so you're seeing their very, very decisive action taken by Gateway Church. I feel like they did the right thing. I feel that that's the way it needs to be handled. There were a few people who did know that Robert's sins were with a minor, okay? So Robert did confess this to some people. The problem is that something this serious probably needed to be made public, probably to all of the elders and many other people involved, even maybe gotten and other senior leaders in the body of Christ to come in. And you got to resist the temptation to keep these just a private matter, because that's what we're seeing with a lot of these situations. Well, it was 20, 30 years ago. Why are we dealing with this now? Well, if it was properly dealt with at the time, if it was properly disclosed at the time, we wouldn't be dealing with any of these situations. So there were some people that directly knew, okay, a handful of people that knew that Robert's sins were with a minor, and there were some who didn't inquire any further about the matter. Again, Gateway does the right thing and lets go of all the elders and staff that had any knowledge of this at all. And this might feel like it's unfair, yet failing to report a crime is a very serious matter. I know I'm a chaplain and I do volunteer work with that. I have to, by law, report any abuse that someone is going through, any type of harm to any individual, even if they plan to self-harm themselves. And in these situations, you could make yourself an accomplice to a crime, as we saw in the Hillsong church saga with Brian Houston, and his father had done this, and the church just handled it internally. Okay, so there could be criminal charges in these things. Okay, so it's not just a church matter. Okay, so clergy, therapists, and chaplains like myself are mandatory reporters. And if you work in a church, if you are a pastor, if you are working in pastoral ministry as an elder, a counselor, you need to know that you need to report these things to the authorities, especially if a crime was committed or someone is being hurt. And you need to know that any individual who will harm themselves or harm others, okay, that this has to be brought to the authorities' attention. So now we're going to see some very, very serious legal implications of these crimes in a moment, and it's going to be very shocking.
Many of you may be wanting more specific details. You need to know that Gateway Church is currently the target of various pending and/or threatened litigation matters, including financial demands that we have received from Robert Morris, which, to be clear, we are rejecting. And you also need to know that Gateway Church is currently and fully cooperating with an ongoing criminal investigation, the details of which we cannot share at this time, and it prohibits us from saying more. We can share with you that the church nor its current leadership are subjects of this criminal investigation.
Okay, so let me just state right up front how upset I am by the fact that Robert Morris had the gall to ask Gateway Church for money. I guess because he is the founding pastor and caused all of this, he thinks he is owed some money for no longer being employed with the church from his poor behavior. This is a clear indication that Robert doesn't fully understand how serious this was, and that repentance could not be full if he had the guts to really ask this church for more money. I was just shaking my head off the board. I want to try to give as much grace as possible, but that was really upsetting. On top of this, it's being reported by the media that his net worth is around $100 million, possibly more. So this is just upsetting on every single level. I thank God that Robert Morris did not have any other victims in this case, and that should be considered. At the same time, it's upsetting to know how he responded to all of this. And he also hasn't made a public statement since stepping down as senior pastor. But now this is leading into a criminal investigation, an ongoing criminal investigation. Law enforcement is involved. So for those of you who are looking for justice in this situation, you might see possible charges brought against those who are involved. God is a God of justice. It says in the Psalms that righteousness and justice are the foundation of his throne. And so many feel hurt. So many people feel just so wounded by this situation. And some people have been in situations very similar to this, and they're so angry. And it's just sometimes just saying sorry for something like this isn't enough. And I think in the church, people say, well, just forgive. Well, just forgive. Yes, we should forgive. We should forgive 70 times 7. But sometimes just saying sorry just quite isn't enough. Sometimes making amends and restitution is required. Sometimes justice is required if a crime has been committed. So we see this with Jesus and Zacchaeus. that when he came into this relationship with Jesus, he agreed to pay back everything he stole from those people as a tax collector and then pay them 4 times the amount of what he robbed from them. So it was only just giving back what he took, but also making amends and restitution and giving them even more money than what he took. Now we're going to see the changes that Gateway Church will make as a result of all of this. And if you're a church a ministry or church pastor, you can see that some of these changes were really common sense, practical approaches, ways that we can have healthy churches, ways that we could structure churches that would be healthy, that would prevent things from like this happening in the first place. So let's get into it.
These past 4.5 months have been a difficult and challenging time for us as a church family, but it's also shown amazing strength and beauty. And the time has come for us to look ahead. And today we are making a decision on the things we will do as a church to be better. As Pastor Levi said last week, which I loved, our pain will not be our template. So in practical terms, we're working diligently to review our internal systems to make sure that all of our ministries and operations carry the highest standards for excellence, integrity, and safety. And we have examined our governance processes here at Gateway, and the truth is that the events of the last few months have demonstrated that there was a massive governance failure and accountability failure here at our church. It was a failure of culture, and we must be honest with ourselves and acknowledge that our culture allowed the truth to be buried for far too long. When a church becomes centered around one pastor alone, it's lost its way. And unfortunately, we have come to the realization over the last few months that at some point in the past, the culture here at Gateway became one where power was centralized and the leader at the top was surrounded by people who wanted to protect him, some of them at all costs. This unchecked leadership approach goes precisely against the scriptural instruction given in Mark 10:42 through 44, where Jesus instructs us to serve one another, just as he came to serve and not to be served. There are things that we as a church can and will do in the coming days and weeks and months to ensure that we have a culture of accountability where something like this can never happen again. And we must accept that this was a massive governance failure, and we must be proactive in providing strong and independent governance by implementing checks and balances on future pastors and church leaders. So in that spirit, we are working currently to make significant changes to our church's bylaws. And this is still a work in progress, but I do want to mention a couple of specific areas of interest where we are making these revisions. First, we will no longer have apostolic elders at this church. We have concluded that this office of apostolic elders as designed did not and does not work for us. We have already eliminated this office. Second, we will no longer have staff members serve as elders at Gateway Church, with the exception of our future senior pastor and potentially an executive pastor, but both of them would serve in a non-voting capacity. We believe that the voting members of the Board of Elders should be comprised of only individuals who are not employed by the church and who do not ultimately report to a senior pastor. We must bring independence and objectivity to the eldership, and it has been lacking in the years past.
Okay, so let me say first and foremost that I really appreciate this elder in particular, Trey Wilbanks. He did a great job as a spokesperson from this whole situation from start to beginning. In the beginning, he showed tremendous accountability, showed tremendous, just that he was heartbroken over the situation, that he understood the emotional pain and all of this involved. He provided clear and intelligent answers. He was emotionally intelligent as well, and just really provided good input every step of the way. So I just think he did a really good job in this. I've seen a couple other situations like this where they totally botched it. I believed almost everything that he has said from the beginning. He's done a really good job in all of this. But I really like the fact how he started off this last statement, that he took full responsibility for all this and acknowledged that many things in their church weren't really working and needed to change. And that's the place that we're in as the corporate body of Christ right now. We want to acknowledge these things so that we can make some changes. And some of the things that Gateway made, the changes that they're going to make, can be applied to many of the churches that are involved in these scandals and situations right now. Their ministry really revolved around one powerful man at the top, which was Robert Morris. And these pastors become like gods in their church cultures. I've been at churches like this. I've been in charismatic churches like this. And this goes to say that unchecked leadership approach goes precisely against Jesus' teaching that we as leaders are called to serve, okay? So this provides a situation where these leaders are at the top. They become celebrities. In many cases, they become rich. They become untouchable, unapproachable. But we see Jesus' leadership all the way as his last act is to wash the disciples' feet, is to serve them, is to show servant leadership. And let me tell you, especially in charismatic churches, there are a lot of churches that run like this, with just one big guy at the top of the power structure, one big leader holding all the power. And if anything surfaces about that leader, it can be covered up to protect the brand. Actually, this is the case for dozens of churches that I've been involved with. And I've also been in a church where the church is completely run by a board and the pastor doesn't have enough power. That's not good either. Okay, we need a healthy balance of pastors having spiritual authority to do their job, fulfill the vision that God has given them. And we need to have church boards that aren't filled with just all yes people, but that can stand up to the pastor if things start going off track. Okay, and in Gateway Church, they did that. The elders stepped up, they took charge, they removed Robert Morris, they removed his almost any mention of him from the website, the materials and stuff like that. Like this elder board was no joke. And this is a hard balance to get right, okay? Okay, so we want a senior pastor to have real leadership, real executive leadership. We want him to have power, okay? But we also need to make sure that there are healthy boards and structures set up so that basically that he could be checked if things start going off the rails, okay? So many are either wide left or wide right in this regard. So there are many churches where there's just one pastor that is almost like a king and almost like in a monarchy, which has total control. And then I've seen one church that my friend is a part of, where the board is totally 100% in control. The pastor is just the puppet. The pastor just does what the board tells him to do. And there's really some healthy place in the middle that's really the right place that where we want to get. But most people don't like to really work out the tension and find like a real good, healthy balance. So many people just fall into extremes. It's very sloppy in many aspects. But in modern day Christianity, many preachers become celebrities, unchecked power. They become rich. They write books. They become famous, so to say. And it's just dangerous. And then usually right after that comes entitlement and pride and arrogance. And these leaders are no longer servant leaders. They're no longer there for the people. And a lot of times people start off in ministry, they start off with the right intentions, but as the fame, the money, the influence grows, they go off track. And they're actually using their people to gain more power and influence. And a good shepherd should be someone that lays down his life for his sheep, who serves them, who's transparent, open, humble, approachable, and he doesn't use them for his own ambitions. Churches are not meant to revolve around one single gifted pastor, although we need to admit that God does grant some spiritual giftings more than others, okay? So there are very few people. I know a few revolutionary leaders in my area. It's probably about a handful. These people are extremely gifted and could not be replaced. You could not replace them with anybody else because they are senior, visionary type leaders. And we want to acknowledge that not everybody has that level of power that can run 8 churches or whatever, or a multi-million-dollar ministry, okay? There are very certain rare people that come along like that. But we want to avoid the trap of giving those type of revolutionary, visionary leaders to have unchecked power, to have all the power. Okay, so as a result of this, Gateway Church makes a great decision. They get rid of all paid elders, okay, which is a great move. Why? Because if they are being paid, they can end up consciously or unconsciously making decisions to protect themselves or to protect the brand, since their salaries are on the line. I never attended a church with paid elders, and I'm shocked to find out that this was even the case. But then again, Gateway Church does have over 100,000 people attending services on all campus, and I've never been a part part of a church even close to that large in size. So good move by Gateway Church to move in the right direction. I think they gave some very common sense principles, very common sense leadership. And so we're almost at the end here. We get to hear one last comment of summing up everything so far, and they did a really good job.
We must learn from the mistakes of our past, or we will be doomed to repeat them. And an honest assessment of our church reveals that, like so many churches today, we became too metric-driven, too focused on a single individual. We also became less relational, and we moved away from the original intention of church. And this is perhaps the defining problem of churches today. And we must reject the temptation to measure a church's success simply on attendance and giving. Metrics, while good, do not accurately measure the health of a church. We must be a church focused on making disciples of the nations and spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Okay, again, really appreciated those statements. I love the line he started with. We must learn from the mistakes of the past, or we are doomed to repeat them. Why the heck do you think I'm doing these videos? It's not for clicks and likes. I lose money on this channel. It's to say, wake up, church. What we're doing isn't working, and we need to learn the mistakes. We need to learn from these situations so we can have a better future. And if we sweep them under the rug, if we don't deal with them, we'll be right in the same situation again. Jesus is coming back for a spotless bride. And I believe that's part of what's going on right now. He loves his bride. He's washing her with the word, washing her with correction and discipline, so that when he returns and touches down on the Mount of Olives, that he will be coming back for a pure and spotless bride. Because I want to put it out there that if you make mistakes like this as a ministry, as a leader, you are going to get burned, and it's going to be very hurtful and painful like you can't imagine. I remember when I first learned how to drive a motorcycle, and I took my friend's bike that was a little too powerful, and I wasn't ready for that bike yet, but I took it out on a spin, and I was going really fast, and I crashed. And man, I tell you, I didn't have the proper leather clothes on and everything, and I had scrapes up down my arms, down my chest. It was devastating, painful situation, a painful experience. But let me just tell you something I learned from that is to be very, very cautious with motor vehicles, to be very cautious with electronic equipment that is moving quickly. And I really made sure before that I never made the same mistake again, to drive recklessly, to drive too quickly, to not be fully informed in the process, because it was so painful. I remember screaming in the shower for about a month after that accident. It was one of the most painful things in the world. And you learn your lesson from painful situations. And that's why when we face these situations in the church, we've got to talk about them. So I was talking to a megachurch pastor last month, and he said to me, Josh, we are all deeply, deeply terrified right now by what's going on with these church scandals. Pastors are legitimately very scared. We're terrified. And although I didn't want to see anybody living in fear, but I would say it is good. I somewhat rejoiced in that statement, because it is good to have a healthy reverence for the office of a pastorate, to have a healthy reverence if you're going to take leadership in the church, that you know that if you go down the wrong reason for any reason, you could lose it all in a moment's notice. One mistake could have you removed from ministry. In the early church in the book of Acts, they had the fear of the Lord. And with that comes a healthy fear of the Lord, that you want to stay on the straight and narrow path. None of my videos are trying to bash these people. I know it says in the book of Galatians, restore these people gently, and also watch your own life, or you might fall exactly into the same trap. Listen, I know if it wasn't for the grace of God that I could have gone down some of these roads. I know in the past I've done some terrible things too as well. So none of my videos are here trying to bash ministries and pastors. But some of them did needed to be removed. Some of them did needed to be charged with crimes. I'm angry. I'm upset. But I'm not trying to bash people that have been removed and taken out of ministry. The justice has already been served. But this is a warning sign to say, just like King David, don't go down this road. Don't follow that storyline because it's going to be painful. It's going to wreck a lot of people. You're seeing Gateway Church down 35 to 40%, and it's probably a lot higher than they're even admitted. So I love how he closed the video that we must resist. Trey said this, we must resist the temptation to see success in ministry in terms of numbers and how large our church is and how large our ministry is and how much money we take in. Any church can easily fall into that type of trap. Remember Jesus' ministry. At times he had large crowds, and other times his message got a little deeper. The crowds started to disappear. The followers scattered. While we should not despise a church in terms of its size or success, because I know many good larger churches, many of them, but a healthy church is not defined by what they're defined by, not by success, not by money, but whether they raise up disciples, whether they help people mature in the faith. And not how many members they have, not how much money they take. That's the main point of Christianity. It's the Great Commission to make disciples of all nations. The main point of the church is to spread the gospel message, to raise up disciples in the faith, mature believers in the faith. The charismatic church is raising up babies. They are raising up immature Christians that are totally dependent upon leadership. They're carnal and fleshly. We've got to make real disciples that are mature in the faith. And hopefully mature, healthy believers of good character who will go out and multiply the works of the gospel, and they will go out and disciple people who will then go out and disciple more people. So much of the church today is just attracting crowds, and we don't want to just create crowds. We want to create disciples. That is the main point of it. Okay? We don't want Christians. We don't want just followers. We want to make disciples, people that are committed, severely committed to the faith. Maybe you'd even lay down their lives for them. Okay, so comment down below with your questions and comments. I'll do my best to comment on the first couple of comments that come in. At this point, there's so many comments, I can't reply to all. If you would like to support the channel so I can continue to bring you videos like this in the future, you can hit the give button right on YouTube. Check the video description to find out how to give a one-time donation, PayPal or Zelle. And if you really like the content and you feel like, called to partner with me for $9.99, you can join right here on YouTube or on Patreon to become a monthly partner. You get extra perks, can interact with you a bit closer, because I really want to expand this ministry. I have another channel for evangelism, another channel for news and politics from a Christian perspective, and I cannot expand this ministry without getting more monthly supporters. So I appreciate your help in this, and I'm just going to close the video with one promotional offer for people that are interested. Thank you for listening today. Be blessed. So this video today is brought to you by Birch Gold, one of your most trusted sources in adding gold to your investment portfolios, your 401ks, and IRAs. It's a way that I can fund this ministry and offer a product that I personally believe in. We are living in uncertain times, and two monumental things are happening right now. The U.S. debt is so large that the United States is going to begin to just make interest payments on our debt. And the U.S. dollar is on the decline because the world is moving away from the U.S. dollar. We're seeing also shakings in the stock market, the world moving towards digital currencies, cryptocurrencies. One way to secure your financial future is to make sure you own hard assets like gold, which are not tied to the US dollar. This is something I'm doing myself, investing in silver. Birch Gold has people flocking to them right now because people realize how serious the times we are in. Now, all securities do come with risks. I'm not a financial professional, so you're responsible to do your due diligence. But the people at Birth Gold will give you a great education on gold so that you can make an informed decision. Gold has beat the stock market for the last 20 years. So get your free gold kit today. Get your free promotional offer and find out how to do this by going to birchgold.com/torn curtain. When you get to the webpage, you just put your name, phone number, and email, and they'll send you over a free gold kit by email and follow up with a phone call.